Out of the 39 managers that have taken charge of the US men's team, 25 of them have been foreign born. They've never had an Argentinian. Look, for the US, the Copa America was underwhelming at best and a shit show at worst. I mean, it's not often that the host gets knocked out at the group stages of Copa America. And when I say not often, I mean it's the first time it's ever happened. Anyway, this was a major blow for US soccer, and the calls for the coach, Berhalter, to be fired came in hot and heavy.
And on an icy cold, blustery, dark Wednesday in July.
I actually don't know what the weather is like, but it just kind of adds to the atmosphere. He was fired, which meant that the USSF's technical director, Matt Crocker, had a big job on his hands. Find a man who can lead the nation into the 2026 World Cup. Now, loads of names were mentioned. You had Klopp, Thierry Henry, Bielsa, Allegri, and of course, Mauricio Pochettino. Now, the interesting thing about this is that when you consider the names of the managers on that list, there are so many varying styles of play, different philosophies, and different strengths that they can all bring to the US men's team. And this is why getting this decision right is so important, because Matt Crocker and the USSF had to decide not only what style they want the US men's team to play, but also what would fit in best with the current crop of players that they have. Because this couldn't necessarily be looked at as a long-term appointment. After all, it's under 2 years until the World Cup. So they had to decide on someone who would fit the aforementioned criteria perfectly. And Matt Crocker believes that Pochettino does that. And it's worth noting that this isn't the first time that Crocker and Pochettino's paths have crossed. Crocker held various roles such as academy manager at Premier League Southampton and worked with Pochettino between January 2013 and November 2013 during Pochettino's first stint in the Premier League as the Saints boss. Anyway, back to the question as to why Crocker and the USSF believe Pochettino is perfect for the US men's team. There were rumblings before Copa America that Berhalter had actually taken this group of players, some people calling them the golden generation, as far as he actually could. Yes, he'd integrated players such as Pulisic, Sergio Dest, Tyler Adams, and ensured that they'd fully established themselves during his tenure. But there were concerns that the team's setup and style of play was too heavily reliant on Pulisic, and that they lacked any drive or real creativity from midfield. But the team is now perhaps at a perfect stage for Poch to enter. Why? Well, there's a few reasons. Firstly, youth. Now, we all know that Pochettino is renowned for nurturing young talent. This started at the very early part of his career, playing under Argentinian boss Bielsa, when he was given his debut as a youngster at Newell Old Boys, alongside a raft of other youth players. But why does Pochettino prefer youth over established players with years of experience? Firstly, he believes there's a degree of difficulty in changing the mentality and habits of players who have played under a number of different managers who have different styles and different philosophies. He believes it's easier and more effective to mould younger players who are more able to adjust to his methods. And this can be seen even in his sole season in charge of Chelsea. Yeah, he still played experienced players, but he also played a number of youth players. And whilst it did take a while, it was clear from Chelsea's form in the second half of the season that he was getting those players to play in the style that he wanted. He's also not a fan of big name stars dominating the dressing room. He wants a team that is cohesive and fully behind a common goal. Now, it could be argued that Pulisic is a big name star who dominates, and perhaps he does, but in reality he doesn't dominate to a detrimental extent. So all good there. And this point is probably best highlighted by his time at PSG, where he seemed to struggle somewhat, having the likes of Neymar, Messi and Mbappe almost undermining the focus and the team's cohesion off the ball. Now, when you look at the US men's team in terms of their characters and their ages, it actually suits Pochettino and his style of play really well. Plus, he should have enough time to forge relationships with the players and instill his philosophy in time for the World Cup. Now, another reason Poch favours the youth is his love of playing the high press. He feels that a younger squad works so much better for this tactic because it's not just about your physical capabilities, how much you're willing to run. And part of his tactics are another reason why he would be a good fit for the men's team. You see, other than playing the high press, Poch likes to build his attacks up centrally through the pitch. And that fits perfectly with the current crop of players in the US team. You have Adams, who provides brilliant defensive strength at the base of the three-man midfield, where he absolutely excels in ball progression and pinpoint passes to more advanced players. You have Johnny Cardoso, a strong tackler and someone who can naturally set the tempo from deep. You also have the likes of Weston McKennie, who offers invaluable technical skill and versatility, coupled with Rayner, who adds forward drive and fearlessness. And when you add the likes of Musa's ball carrying ability, Luca de la Torre's late runs, and Malik Tillman's creative passing, Pochettino will have plenty of options to suit his style. However, it's not all positive. An area where Pochettino's style might fall a little bit short is when it comes to chance creation by the opposition. As an example of this, we can see that during his time at Chelsea, whilst they did score 77 league goals, they also conceded 63, which is more than Chelsea have conceded in any other season since the Premier League began. And similar goals scored to goals conceded ratios can also be seen during his first and last season at Spurs, although in fairness, the 3 seasons in between those were much better. Why is this so important? Well, because as unsexy as it might sound, international football is grounded in having a strong defensive foundation. And defense is an area where the US team currently lack somewhat in quality. You have Nottingham Forest's Matt Turner in goal, who barely started a game last season and whose kicking and distribution during Copa America was lackluster. And if Poch were to use the other option in goal, you'd have Cardiff City's Evan Horvath, which would be, harsh or not, a step down in quality. Evidenced perhaps by the goal he conceded against Panama when he came on to replace Turner. You then have to consider that there's a shortage of options to replace Tim Ream at centre-back, who turns 37 this October. You also have Chris Richards as the other natural starting centre-back, but other than him, there isn't really anyone of true quality coming through the ranks for that position. All in all, Poch has the tactical nous to bring this team together and get them playing. But he will have to ensure that his possession game is tip-top to ensure that they can mask some of the weaknesses that they have at the back. Now, at the time of this video being published, Pochettino hasn't officially been confirmed as the US men's team coach. However, as it makes sense for both parties, let's just assume that it is. But it still throws up a couple of questions. Firstly, where is Poch going to be based? Well, in pandemic flashback style, he wants to work from home, as in he'll be based in Europe. Now, on the surface, this might seem a little bit odd, but in reality, it makes perfect sense, as the majority of the US team play in Europe, and any young players coming up through the ranks in the MLS over the next year or so are also likely to be snapped up by teams in Europe. And if there is any uproar about this from anyone in the US, just think about Scaloni. Despite being the head coach of Argentina, he chose to stay in Spain. And winning the Copa America twice and the World Cup just goes to prove that you don't need to be based in the country that you are the head coach of. Now, a bigger question about this appointment is how the hell can the USSF actually afford Pochettino? I mean, Greg Berhalter was paid a reported $2.2 million in total package, and his contract technically ran until 2026, so he'll also be due compensation. We mentioned Argentinian head coach Scaloni earlier. He's on around $2.5 million per year, and the likes of Bielsa are on about $4 million per year. So how can the USSF compete with these sorts of numbers, or even get anywhere close to the $13.3 million per year salary that Pochettino was on whilst he was at Chelsea? Well, in truth, they can't. So they're going to have to look at other options. Now, the Canadian model could be the way forward. Canada hired Jesse Marsh as their head coach in May and decided to go around the country's 3 MLS teams, Montreal, Toronto and Vancouver, with their charity pot to try and scrape together about $1.5 million to fund the acquisition of Jesse Marsh, which means that he now has the strangely long title of MLS Canada Men's National Team Head Coach. Anyway, it would appear from recent reports that there isn't any appetite amongst the MLS clubs based in the US to fund a similar contribution, so this option's probably off the table. Now, they could look at the Messi model. When Lionel Messi joined Inter Miami in 2023, the transfer was facilitated by the player being given a revenue share with some of the MLS's key partners, including Adidas and Apple. Now, from everything I can read, this seems like the most likely option. Now, from an outsider's perspective, aka mine, I see Pochettino taking on this role as more beneficial to the US men's team than it is to Pochettino. It's a strange move for a manager with such a high profile taking on a challenge like this at this stage in his career, specifically taking on the US men's team. What is going to be judged as a job well done? Getting out of the groups? Getting to the quarterfinals? The semis? Because realistically, you could be the best manager in the world, and the odds of leading the US team to lifting the World Cup are almost non-existent. And the World Cup being tournament football where almost anything can happen, what happens to Pochettino's credentials if he fails to get them out of the groups?